trying to do with these events where we invite you to come back is to give you that sense of here's what's going on that's new and interesting and exciting that you may not have been aware of previously. So tonight we're here to talk about the fiscal cliff, narrowly averted at the end of the year in what I think everybody pretty well agreed moments after voting for it was the ugliest piece of legislation that had ever been birthed out of the United States Congress. We've seen that before, right? The implication of this for Hampton Roads is potentially compelling, and it is already, in fact, the uncertainty is already having impacts in the region. So we've assembled tonight, I think, the smartest, brightest people to talk about this. And in order to do that, you have to kind of understand how our economy, who's giggling about the smartest, brightest? Okay.
It's the panel.
In order to do that, you really sort of have to have an understanding of where the economy is now and how it's comprised. And so to do that, we are very happy to have Dr. Gil Yoakum, who is the Dean of the College of Business and Public Administration here at Old Dominion University. Dean Yoakum, thank you for being here. We'll just take a few minutes and talk, or let me introduce everybody first, and then we'll come back and have you start us off, if that's all right. Seated to his right, sorry, I have to work that out a little bit, is Craig Quigley, who is the head of the Hampton Roads Federal Facilities, Federal Military Facilities Alliance, Harumph.
His other right.
Left.
Yay. That's what I said, the left. This is why I don't fly planes. Okay. So, let's see. Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay. You know, look, here's the story of my career. When I was in 3rd grade, this is a true story, my teacher wrote on my report card, if Kathy would spend more time on her studies and less time visiting with her neighbors, she would be a better student. And I've just spent too much time visiting with my neighbors, and I'm sorry about that. There you have it. So really, this is the only thing I know how to do. We're also very glad to have Marty Kazabowski with us, who is also a Civic alum, class of 2004. He's doing some very interesting work in innovation, in new technologies, and in trying to create an environment in Hampton Roads that will be more friendly and more nurturing of those kinds of businesses. And he is doing that right now as Director of Innovation Strategies for Kaufman and Knowles Consulting. Dave Street is the Senior Vice President of Operations for Valkyrie Enterprises. He and Craig are members of the current class. And Dave got dragged into this because his boss told him to be here. He was asked to do it originally, said, yeah, I think I can do it, might have a conflict. And so I think Dave found out this morning that he was going to be doing it. But
last night.
Last night? Okay, so.
On the way back from DC. Yeah.
But he knows what he's talking about. So and thank you, Dave, for stepping into that. I sure do appreciate it. So what we've asked each of our guests to do tonight is just give us a couple of minutes overview of this situation with the fiscal cliff and the prospect of this term sequestration from their own perspective. We've asked them to talk about the implications for the region and where there may be bright spots and opportunities for us to leverage. So with that, Dean Yoakum, will you start us off, please? Our Chief of Technology, Christensen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
A little snowy and wet out there. Welcome to Old Dominion University. Kathy's asked me to, and thank you, Kathy, for inviting me, to give you an overview of the defense industry in Hampton Roads, extremely brief, and some idea of what might happen with sequestration. So let's get started. This gives you an idea of the gross expenditures by the Department of Defense in Hampton Roads by year up through 2012. You can see that over the last 12 years, defense spending in the region has more than doubled. This is a very important component of our economic growth, and really, if we were to go back and disaggregate, well, gee, how much growth in the region was really the responsibility of Department of Defense spending, we'd come up with a number of close to 75%. So 75% of the region's growth over the past 12 years can really be attributed to these outside monies, which are very, very powerful. They're not like new stadiums or basketball arenas. They're exogenous, coming from outside the system. They're extremely powerful, and indeed they're magnified. And so what we can see here is the kinds of expenditures we're looking at, roughly, if we can we're looking at the kind of expenditures that really impact across the community in terms of military personnel, which really, of those funds, provide about 56%. And those really rapidly growing incomes on the part of people in our military have been a substantive part of the growth. So mean salaries for military folks are far above the mean salaries for non-military or civilian personnel in the region. DoD civilian personnel, again, their average total compensation approaches $100,000 a year in this region. These are very high-paying jobs. They're about a little less than a fifth of those DoD expenditures that you see here. DoD procurement, 26%. That would be things like the new Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier. When I was here in the Navy 44 years ago, they used to have this thing called public, Craig, what was it called? Public, they don't even remember anymore. Public Works. Yeah, Public Works. Well, these days, those things are ferreted out to the community, and that's part of DoD procurement, part of the civilian-military interaction, a really important component of those $22 billion that you saw expended here. Okay, Hampton Roads regional product attributable to DoD spending, to give you an idea of just how very important those numbers are. 44.9%. So what we can do, it's interesting, if we go down to Camp Lejeune, or we go to where the 81st Airborne Division is, I forget the city of Fort Bragg, well, we have our little laboratories of, what do these exogenous expenditures do to jobs? Because really the military is close to 100% of the base component. And roughly, just for the sake of having a rough measure, if we take that $22 billion and double it to about $44 billion, we've really got close to what that proportion is here. And so, because our regional income is close to $90 billion, so 44.9% of regional output can be attributed to DoD spending. That's not just the Navy, that's also the Air Force, that's also the Army at Fort Eustis. So you can see it's an awfully large component. Now you can also see that during the military build down in the late 1990s, we dropped to 34.5%, but that's risen obviously appreciably. Okay. So, sequestration, the intermediate threats to DoD spending on Hampton Roads, the sequestration time horizon, and part of the reason the numbers look so scary is because they're a 10-year time period. Let's take a look, and as we disaggregate them, at what we're really looking at. General defense spending cuts already in place. They're already in the budget of $487 billion. In addition, since the super committee failed to act, we're going to see $1.2 trillion in automatic cuts likely to be imposed if sequestration takes effect at the beginning of March. That's an additional $550 billion in defense cut. And so, if we look at the defense-based budget here, this is what it was a year ago, what it looked like a year ago going forward. Here's what it looked like after last year's budget. Here's what it looks like with the combined effect of sequestration. Work these numbers out for you here. So full sequestration for fiscal year 13 to fiscal year 21 is $564 billion. Big. Total change over $1 trillion over the 10-year period. Okay, so what does that translate to in terms of, since this is an important part of the economic base, what does that translate to in terms of job numbers that people like to talk about and understand? So, using the CBO estimate, we're going to use two different estimates here to give you a range. CBO estimate, we're estimating that the reduction in DoD spending in the region would be up to $1.45 billion. The GRP loss would be $2.69 billion, and the job loss would be 27,000 jobs. Pretty powerful effect. 2.7% of the total metropolitan area total. Of course, that does give you an idea, too, of how very large this economy is. A lot of people don't realize it, but it's larger than, if you go from Williamsburg to Currituck County in North Carolina, this economy, and this is how economists think of it, as a little nation, is larger than 2/3 of the nations of the world. Pretty big economy. So even with these kind of major hits, we're looking at a percent GRP loss of less than 5%. We use the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessment. It's one of the larger. You can see the numbers, close to 40,000 jobs. So just to get you set for the rest of the folks, we're looking at some pretty substantial kinds of hits that should sequestration actually take effect. So I'm going to answer any questions you have. Go to
Thank you, Gil, I appreciate that. Is there a cop here? So that's pretty amazing, isn't it? I had never heard that figure about how large this economy is compared to other nations. I mean, that really gives you a sense of what we're talking about. Craig's job has been to advocate for the defense sector in Hampton Roads, and so he also, in his past life, is a career naval officer. He was the chief of information for the Navy, which meant that when anything bad happened, he's the one who got to face the reporters at the Pentagon. Awesome job. And so he's a retired rear admiral who has been in this whole process, watching how money moves through the system, and some very interesting information for us in terms of those impacts. Right?
And of course, David and I are members of the great class of 2013, Civic, the best class that ever was. I will follow on with Dean Yoakum's excellent tee-off. Never in my professional life have I seen the confluence of events that are going to happen to us around the 1st of March. You have the nation bumping up against the debt ceiling. You have sequestration kicking in around the 1st of March. And you have the expiration of the continuing resolution that has funded the federal government, all pieces of the federal government, expiring as of the 27th of March. Now, they are discrete events, but they are politically completely joined at the hip. And you've seen the president state, I will not negotiate on the debt limit. And you've seen the Republicans in the House side particularly say, I'm all done with additional revenues. And that is 6 weeks from now that those events I've just described, the first two of them roughly, kick in. So I'm an optimist by nature, but I believe that we will at least start down the road of sequestration. Unless you believe that the Congress can accomplish in the next 6 weeks what it has not been able to do over the past year. And that just stretches my imagination to the breaking point, and I can't buy it. I don't think that it's going to happen, so I believe we will at least start down the path of sequestration. Gil has given some excellent numbers. Let me kind of put a little bit of coloration around the edges on that. Where are we going to feel sequestration? In what areas? The president has exempted uniformed military personnel, and that is a significant plus for Hampton Roads. But it does not exempt the civil servants, and there are a lot of civil servants that work in Hampton Roads, in all agencies of the federal government, I will add. So that's one. Second is operations. You're going to see Navy ships not get underway. Navy planes not fly, Air Force planes not fly, cancellation of training exercises all over the place. Maintenance, you're going to see ship maintenance, aircraft maintenance, vehicle maintenance be deferred or canceled outright. A week ago, the Deputy Secretary of Defense put out a memo to the services, and the federal DoD agency says, get ready for sequestration. And here are some things that I want you to have ready to pull the trigger on by February 15th. And one of them was the cancellation of all third and fourth quarter ship maintenance availabilities in the Navy. That has a huge impact on Hampton Roads, on the ship repair yards, particularly on the south side. So that is a very big deal. And finally, the other piece that we'll see in Hampton Roads is service contracts. If I'm a federal contracts officer or a federal comptroller, I need to capture this year's money in order to achieve my fiscal year targets for the remainder of fiscal year 13. So something next year or 3 years from now doesn't help me. I've got to achieve my target in this year money, and I've only got 7 months left in the fiscal year to do that. So I have got to go where the money is. And that's the civil servants, it's the service contracts, it's the operations, it's the maintenance in order to get the money I need to meet my targeted budget reduction goals. And those are all significant pieces that will have an effect on Hampton roads. So Leroy and I were talking before we started here about, so kind of what's the plan, you know, for 2013, given all these budget uncertainties. What a pleasant euphemism that is. But it's, you go where the money still is. I still believe there are going to be 3 areas of growth in the defense budget, despite the pressures coming in the years ahead. One is going to be special operations. We have a robust special operations presence in Hampton Roads, largely Navy. The special operators love training here because of the diversity of training environments that it offers. Let's not dork that up. We have an ability to continue to grow that, and we should do everything we can to do so. Second is cyber. The Navy has a significant cyber presence in Hampton Roads that is physical location agnostic, but it's here. It's a start. Let's build on that, and let's see what else we might attract to the region. And the third area of growth is unmanned systems. We've come to see the use of drones, and I hate that word, because that implies some mindless, uncontrollable thing. They're anything but uncontrolled. They're very well controlled, but they don't have a pilot in them. So they're remotely piloted. I like that term much better. But this is going to be a growth area domestically, because a year ago the Congress told the FAA to get on with it and figure out a way to safely integrate, keyword, unmanned systems in the nation's airspace. Not segregated. You know, you guys fly over there, we're going to have the airliners fly over here. No, you're going to be in the same airspace. That's a daunting challenge, but it needs to be done to recognize the rapid advancements in technology that are taking place. Well, the FAA is supposed to pick 6 sites around the nation to figure out a safe way to do that testing, and so that they can safely fly in the same airspace. We want to be one of the 6. We want to knit together the capabilities of NASA Langley, NASA Wallops on the eastern shore, Naval Air Station Patuxent River in southern Maryland, the National Institute of Aerospace in Hampton, which has an excellent relationship with dozens of universities that have first-rate aeronautics programs, as well as the FAA's own tech center in Atlantic City, New Jersey. We've got a memo of agreement in place between the 3 governors of New Jersey, Maryland, and Virginia. We've got 6 senators lined up supporting all the relevant representatives. We've got a board of directors in place. We're waiting for the request for proposals to come out from the FAA. We've got a proposal writing team on standby, and we're going to go for this. Why? Because those 6 sites are going to become centers of gravity of UAS research, development, and testing in the years ahead. So let's grow a UAS industry here, even more robust than we already have today, and completely use the federal facilities to grow private industry. So it's an interesting leveraging that we can do. So take your questions in a bit.
Dave Street represents the defense contracting community in this respect. Defense contractors, you just heard Craig and Gil talk, are going to be faced with some pretty significant challenges here shortly. Some of them are already experiencing those and are warning their employees to be prepared for what may come down the road. And a lot of contractors are believing that this moment will change significantly how we go about this business moving forward.
Thank you. I had some prepared remarks, but after Dr. Yoakams, Dean Yoakams, and Craig's comments, I'm Dave Street. I was a defense contractor. I'm looking for a job, I guess. Just kidding. Just kidding. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. We've had a great day. If you look at the panel, you know, I was just looking across the room here and thinking about today. The panel that that the team has assembled here is just phenomenal. We had a great day with the hands-on with Jake and with Goose today. You guys who have never been exposed to Navy. I'm a Navy guy. I was in the Navy, Navy contractor, so I've been around a lot. You guys experienced a lot today that most people really don't ever get the chance to see. You know, the day-to-day interaction, just having lunch with the guys in the galley and talking to those young men and women. I mean, phenomenal kids. I mean, they're kids. If you think about it, those kids are protecting our country. So right there. With Dean Yoakum, you're getting the educational view of this scenario, this problem, which is very important, taking that approach. You got Craig, who has his background, his knowledge of having been there, and the vision of the Navy, where the Navy's going. He brings that approach. And then with Marty on the economic side, it's you know, you see that approach. Me, I'm the defense contractor. I'm the guy living this day to day, trying to make a living just like you guys are and feed my family. So let me give you a little bit about me first, and tell you a little bit about my company. That way some of my notes maybe come together a little bit more clear for you. Again, I'm ex-Navy. I did 6 years, don't give me more credit, 6 years in the Navy submarine business. I was a nuclear electrician, served on fast attack submarines, been under the North Pole a couple times, which was fun. Got out in 1989, went to work for a defense contractor then. Was with a large defense contractor for about 22 years. Didn't like the large defense contracting business, came to a small business. Where I am at now is a company called Valkyrie Enterprises. We're a small, veteran-owned business, actually a Vietnam veteran-owned business here in Virginia Beach. We have offices in San Diego. Our headquarters is here in Virginia Beach. We have offices in Port Hueneme, California, Charleston, Mayport, Florida, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and Yokosuka. Why? Because that's where the Navy is, and that's where we have to go to make our living. So what you're seeing today is this impact, not just here locally in Hampton Roads, but all of our employees everywhere is going to be impacted by that. So what we do shipboard installation. We have guys and girls out on board ships every day doing work on board the ship systems, taking old equipment off and putting new equipment on. We have folks doing design. We have engineers, professional engineers doing design of ships, ship systems, new things that are going to go on board the ships. We have folks that do that. We have folks that do training, computer-based training. You know, that's why I was asking Goose today kind of what the training side is on the NavAir side, because we do a lot of computer-based training and training development for the Navy's sea systems, which is the shipboard side. We do training for that. And we also do a lot of program management support. So that makes up about our 200 employees globally. We're about 20, I'll say 26 to make my boss happy. $26 million past year. Now my comments tonight are going to focus more on the technical services market. If some of you were at the breakfast a couple weeks ago that was hosted by Civic, you saw my boss get up there and talk about some of the same things I'm going to talk about tonight, which is the technical services market. And as Craig said, that technical services market really, outside of the ship, I'll say construction industry, which are your big boys like Newport News Shipbuilding across the river, that ship services, technical services side is what makes up most of the market here in Hampton Roads. That's the guys and gals out on board the ships, the small shipyards down in the Gulf or the harbor here in Norfolk, doing the day-to-day maintenance repair on the ships. When they come in for an availability upgrade, that's those guys and girls. I guess, you know, if I would have to summarize this, really, what's going on is really uncertainty from my perspective. My customers, which are the guys and gals that give me money, have no clue what's going on. They really don't. They're getting very little guidance from above. Up until recently, there was no guidance even put out by them. I would say within the last week, and Craig, maybe you've seen this too, I think you just mentioned this, and Bruce and Jake have probably seen this, you know, Deputy Undersecretary Carter finally put out a memo and said, here's some of the things you need to do. They need to be reversible just in case we get there. You know, if the miracle does happen, we need to be able to reverse some of these things, but maybe not. So they need to start looking at little things like travel. You know, you can't go on travel now unless you get, you know, your highest echelon command's approval. You can't go to conferences, little things. In my opinion, those little things are not even going to move the needle. I think as Craig said, as we heard Goose and Jake say today, the big thing that's really going to be impacted are the ships. Where they're going to get the big bang for the bucks is when they start tying the ships up at the pier over there, or they stop flying airplanes. That's where the real savings are. And when they start doing that, people like me on the defense contracting side aren't going to have upgrades to do on ships. We're not going to be able to go on board the ships to fix things. They're going to be locking the doors and saying, we're not going to do any maintenance. Because one of the guidance they put out was third and fourth quarter availabilities, which is where they go in and fix the ships. You know, the ships are in an upgrade cycle where they go into I explained this to my mother, they go into the repair shop every couple of years to get fixed. Well, they're going to cancel all those. They cancel all those, that takes a lot of business out of people like me's pocket. So when they start doing that, then the big tides start to roll. They talked about furloughs for government employees. When that starts to happen, then we're going to see the contractor side get hit too. And the contractor side, I'd say out of about 200 of our folks, I would say a good maybe 40% of those, 50% of those are on site with the customer and provide that civilian support. So it's really going to be a ripple down effect as far as how this is going to be coming down. The thing for us, the thing to grow really is the pie. I look at it as the pie. The pie's not getting any bigger. So for somebody like me, somebody like a Valkyrie Enterprises to grow, I got to get really competitive and go after somebody else's pie. And how do I do that? I got to get my costs down. And the government contracting side is a whole different story, a whole different topic that we can take probably a couple hours to talk about. The whole defense contracting industry has changed over the last 6 to 8 months. There was an issue up in Newport, Rhode Island, where there was a defense contractor giving kickbacks to a government employee that was his boss on the government side, and they were just passing the money around. Well, that caused a big shift. That arm in the government contracting side just shifted majorly to the right. So every rule and regulation came out of the books, right back on the table. You can't even go on travel unless you get the senior admiral's permission. It got really bad in the Navy. So I don't know how it is on the Nav Air side, but on the Nav Sea side, for an admiral to travel, or even a captain to travel, you got to go up to the admiral and get permission to travel, or his boss's boss. Same way? Yeah, that's how they've taken it. So, and they've also put these rules in government contracting where they have things called tripwires, maximum salaries. A fully burdened employee on a contract can't be more than $260,000 a year. Now you might say, wow, $260,000 a year, that's a lot of money. So why are we worried about that? Well, you take somebody like a Craig, who's very experienced, brings a lot of wealth of knowledge, he's not cheap. And I tell you, you get that guy on a program, he brings a lot of wealth to that program. But because he's not cheap, once you start to end up the cost of really doing business, your overhead cost, your G&A cost, your M&S cost, you tag that on his salary, you might be sitting around $260,000 a year. Now, he can work the contract, but he has to get, again, go back to the admiral and get permission. Yes, Craig can work on the contract. Those kind of things. So they're really tightening up the strings. The other thing is with the contracting side of the house, you're seeing a lot of contractors starting to buy themselves into a contract where they will just go lowball. They know they can't do the work, but they're going to lowball it and get that contracting officer's permission because they're shifting to something called, let me get this right, technically acceptable lowest cost. So you think, what's wrong with that? When I go to get my toilet replaced in my bathroom, I want to get the lowest cost and best quality person there too. Man, if you think about what we just went through today, those guys and girls that we just had lunch with, you want the lowest cost person really fixing the plane that Squid or Jake's going or Johnny's going to go up in? I don't. Or Goose? I want the best qualified person to do that. So you got contracting companies starting to buy themselves into doing business, and the contracting shop on the Navy, at least what we're seeing on the defense side, is the technical guys want the right people. The contracting guys are starting to rule the day and say, I don't care what you want, technical guys. I'm going to give it to the lowest priced person, and you're just going to have to live with it. So the cost is going to be lower, but the quality is going to be lower. So again, it's a balancing act. Last quick story. I was up in D.C. the last 2 days at a conference for the Surface Navy Association, talking to a senior Admiral Ray, who was telling me that over Fleet Forces Command, JIFCOM, I might get the numbers wrong, so bear with me, but you can get the point here. JIFCOM has a budget, say, of $12 billion. Because of the timing, if sequestration hits and the continuing resolution does not get fixed, that budget goes to somewhere around $9 billion. You say, okay, still $9 billion. But if you remember, the government fiscal year started how many months ago? Back October 1st. We're already 5 or 6 months into this, and if the continuing resolution goes to March, you're already halfway through the year. And oh by golly, guess what? Fleet Forces has already spent about $5 billion of that $9 billion. So they got $4 billion left to go through the rest of the 6 to 7 months. So you know what that means? That's basically tying up ships to the pier, stop flying airplanes. And again, remember what I said earlier was what's going to happen when that starts to happen? People like me are going to be out of business and have a tough time with it. Now, I agree with Craig. There are markets out there, and we have strategically ourselves placed ourselves in some of the strategic markets of cyber and some of those IA information assurance type of topics. But you got to be lean and mean to move forward. You got to reduce your cost, And you really got to chase the money. I agree with that comment. You got to chase the money, and that's what we're doing. So, thank you very much.
Feeling good?
Marty Kasabowski is one of the is such an interesting person to deal to work in the world of technology. He has a wonderful way of bridging the gap for those of us who might feel like that's a little bit of a foreign territory. He has some good news, I think, in terms of some opportunities. Also,
God, I hope so, because I'm terrified.
I know. The snow's coming on top of it all. But Marty has some very interesting thoughts and opportunities about how we become a kind of region that can weather these kinds of storms and grow ourselves into a different kind of scenario. Marty?
Thanks, yeah. Yeah, seriously, are you guys terrified now? I mean, this is scary stuff. And let me start with some disclaimers. I'm not an economist. I'm not a professional economic developer. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night, so but I have been doing this a little while. I've been around the community now for going on 30 years, and as Kathy said, I've sort of bridged that weird place where innovation and economic development and money and other sort of things kind of cross. So I've got a little bit of experience in doing this, and I also periodically get asked to go overseas and talk about similar sorts of things. So I'll try to weave some of that into my comments as well. I don't often try to talk in the abstract, so I'll try to weave some real, sort of personal anecdotes and mention some people from the region that are doing interesting things as we go along. So I really want to talk about three things. The first is, I think we may have fixed this one already, is we need a sense of urgency in order to do the change that we think we're going to have to do. And I'll go into some detail on that one. The other thing I want to point out is that we often talk about small businesses driving the economy, which is complete baloney. New companies drive the economy, so I want to drill into that just a little bit. And then you guys will remember the election of 1992 when then candidate Clinton was told it's the economy, stupid. Well, in our case, it's the ecosystem, stupid. So I want to talk about what an innovation ecosystem is and how we can promote that sort of thing. So, I grew up in Detroit. I'm not a native. Another 3 or 4 generations in the Kasabowskis will be native Virginians. But I grew up in Detroit, and if ever there was a one-company town or a one-industry town, it's Detroit. So this kind of scares me because I've watched Detroit happen over the last 40 years. One of the things you do when you're in the kindergarten in Detroit is you go to the River Rouge plant, which is the largest at the time. It was the largest automotive plant in the world. It covered an entire 1 mile square block. And what's fascinating about it is on the front end comes steel and plastic and employees, and on the other end popped out high-valued automobiles that were sold all over the world and a middle-class lifestyle that we all sort of grew up with. That doesn't exist anymore. But for my entire lifetime, we've been listening to people just like this talk about Detroit as being under threat from the Japanese, from the Germans building really good cars, from the need to modernize our plants, from the need to streamline our operations and so on and so forth. And every couple of years, like clockwork, little panels like this would happen, and we'd all say really, really scary things, and the politicians would all say the right words, and then they'd go back to business, and nothing would happen. Well, you know the story. In 2008, all those predictions finally came true, and GM went bankrupt, Chrysler went bankrupt, we had to bail them out at the risk of millions and millions of jobs. They didn't have the sense of urgency that they needed to have. What concerns me is that we're going to have this same discussion in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, and some of these things will happen. And we will face some pretty serious economic decline without having put in place some of the thinking and some of the sense of urgency we need to get there. So that's item number 1. Item number 2, and it does get more optimistic here. Again, the phrase I use is that new is more important than big or small. We often talk about small companies that drive the economy. That's not really true. It's really new companies that drive the economy. Now, I was told long ago that there are 3 pillars of economic development. There's the attraction pillar, which is where you try to get companies to come to your region. There's the retention and expansion pillar, where you try to help the current companies do more with different emerging markets. There's also the grow your own strategy. And in the time I've been here, we've had a reasonably good function in attraction. We've had some efforts involved with retention and expansion, but we've really never had a grow your own strategy here. It really has never been anyone's job to facilitate that. Why is that important? Well, the Kauffman Foundation, which is sort of the leading think tank on this topic, said recently that it is clear that new and young companies and the entrepreneurs that create them are the engines of job creation and eventual economic recovery. That's pretty straightforward. New companies matter. The other thing that they pointed out was from 1980 to 2005, pretty sizable chunk of time, 1980 to 2005, nearly all net job creation in the United States occurred in firms less than 5 years old. Well, what does that tell us? Not that there's some hope if you start something new. But what it tells us is Lockheed's not going to save us. Boeing isn't going to save us. Those folks aren't going to save us. What's going to save us is starting our own new ventures, starting something new, creating new markets, tapping those markets that Craig just talked about in cyber, unmanned systems, and all of those are important. We can't rely on other people to save us unless we're willing to generate that sense of urgency and create those new ventures that are going to create the jobs going forward. I need to point out too, we talk a lot about innovation in terms of technology, and that's largely true. But I always like to talk too about one of the great job creators of the last 20 years and one of the great innovative companies that any of us have seen is Starbucks. How many of you stopped at Starbucks today? I did, yeah. I should have bought stock 20 years ago. Why are they so innovative? Well, they changed the way we think about coffee. They changed the way their supply chain worked and created an entire new sort of market. They also taught us how to say Frappuccino in public without any embarrassment or irony. A very innovative company. My point there is that, we think about innovation in terms of technologies and so on, but it's also new supply chains, new ways of thinking about markets. And there are things we can do here in Hampton Roads that might be related to that in terms of logistics and port and other things. Third thing I want to talk about, as I said, is it's the ecosystem stupid. And what I really mean when I say that is the environment that facilitates the start and growth of new ventures, the kind that I work with every day, really is a community. And it's a community that starts small and grows. And in the last year or so, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in this community, which you probably read about in the papers, and I could talk about at great length, and I'll save some of that for the Q&A session. But what I want to mention is I have a 16-year-old daughter. She's beautiful, she's brilliant, she's wonderful. I blame her mother. She's taken an environmental science class this semester. So we were talking a little bit about environmental sciences, and she was reading to me what an ecosystem is, and I just thought I'd say it here. Definition of an ecosystem: in a functioning ecosystem, each of the participating species benefit from the presence of all of the other species. Why is that important in this context? Well, because if you're trying to grow a venture, you need to have all of the other pieces of the puzzle in place before you can be credible. And in the past, what we've done is we've often tried to fix one piece of the ecosystem and optimize it without trying to fix the other ones. And for example, for years we tried to get venture capital to come to the region. And they'd come and they'd look around, what they tell us is, well, there are no deals here. Well, there are no deals here because there's no money, but there's no money because there are no deals here. And all that is because there is no management here. It's all because we don't have the capacity to commercialize our technology, and so on and so on and so on. It really is about the total system and working on the entire system and building the community around it as you go. And what I really mean by that is we have tremendous idea generators here at the university, up at NASA Langley, out at the Joint Forces Command, or what's left of it, and DMAS and so on. We're starting to see more and more entrepreneurs that are turning those ideas into ventures. We're starting to see some management come around and interact with those new ventures. We're starting to see mentors and people who are trying to start a new seed capital fund, which I'd love to tell you about sometime. In other words, we're trying to get all of the pieces of the ecosystem in place so that we can begin to grow these ventures. And let me, before I finish, I want to say a couple stories about some people that I've met recently. First one is a woman named Marla Shookman. You don't know Marla. She's 20 years old, 23 years old. I met her up at a conference in DC recently. If you go to her website, hiremarla.com, what you'll see is her soliciting all of the mayors around the country on why she should come and live in their city. She just got back from Tel Aviv. She's looking for a place to live. So she wrote down her list of requirements for why she should come to that city. She wants public transportation, she wants a great arts and the music community, she wants a good startup community where she can get some job and have a great time, she's looking for a husband. So she literally is asking mayors around the country to picture on the city. Well, I'm not the mayor of any place, but I did picture on Hampton Roads, and sure enough, she came down. And she's here this week, and she'll be here next week. I'm going to have her up on the 21st floor to look at the river. And we have a reasonable chance of landing Marla. You know, okay, it's not landing, you know, the next big company, but to the extent that a region like ours can be relevant to one person like Marla Shipman, that tells us that we're starting to build the community in a way that we can begin to grow these ventures that we were talking about. The other one I want to talk about is Josh Fisher. Josh is another young guy. He's got this funky little goatee beard. He speaks in a sort of a California-like accent. Says the word "like" every other time. So, but he's brilliant, and he really wants to make a difference. And he had a company up in D.C. somewhere, and his team was all over the place. And he wanted to kind of consolidate the team. So he was looking for a place where he could bring his company. Very similar to the Marla Shipman story. They got in their car. They drove to Philly, and they drove to Charlottesville. They drove all over the damn place. They finally got to Norfolk, down on Lower Granby Street, and they met a couple of guys. They had some beers with some local people. What they saw was some energy and some community and an ecosystem that was amenable to the way they think and the way they talk and the way they like to do business. So sure enough, they moved, and they're in a building down there. They got a whole floor. They're starting to generate a lot of business. They've got customers up and down the East Coast. They've got really, really bright people there. They're building a relationship with ODU to do some really cool stuff with internships. Again, the idea that we can be relevant to that kind of a company and that kind of a guy gives us some hope that we're not going to be Detroit. We can actually grow our own businesses here. We can become the kind of ecosystem that spits out those cool and fun companies. And more importantly, we can create the jobs that the Kauffman Foundation has told us mostly come from new companies. So, a couple things I want to just leave you with is, we should never let a good crisis go to waste. And I fear that we have let a lot of good crises go to waste here in Hampton Roads in the 30 years I've been living here. I watched it happen in Detroit, I watched it happen in Houston, I watched it happen in a lot of other places. I don't want it to happen here. So let's generate a little sense of urgency. Let's build our ecosystem. Let's find the next Marla Shipman and Josh Fisher and get them here, and they can teach us how to grow our economy.